Mephisto is one of my favorite villains because I'm always fascinated by the idea of what would someone give up their literal or at least metaphorical soul for. And of course, no one in comics explores that idea as much as Mephisto. So if you're a fan of the character like I am, then today I want to share 5 keys at 5 different price levels so that you can find a cool book to add to your collection no matter what budget that you have. And personally, I think that now is a really great time to be looking to buy these keys because all of them spiked about a year and a half ago when there was a lot of speculation that Mephisto was going to show up in Wandavision, and they've really cooled down since he didn't show up. But I think it's inevitable that at some point he does debut in the MCU, and when he does, I expect these books to spike right back up. And so I personally think that if you want these books, now really is a good time to consider picking them up. So let's get to it. Well, if I had $2, I would be looking to buy a copy of Mephisto versus #1. Now, if you've been watching my channel, you know I'm a huge advocate of buying the first issue of the first solo series of characters, because once people start getting priced out of these characters' major grails, like their first appearances, then they start looking to buy the first issue of their first solo series. And so this is the first one for Mephisto. Now this is a pretty interesting series because it's a 4-issue limited series, and in each one he goes up against a different team. So here in issue #1 is Mephisto versus the Fantastic Four. Issue 2 is Mephisto versus X-Factor. Issue 3 versus the X-Men, and then it culminates in issue 4 where he goes against the Avengers. So I think it's a pretty cool concept. It has a cool John Buscema cover. That's going to be a theme through this video if you keep watching. He's kind of the classic Mephisto artist in my opinion. But for $2, I don't think you can go wrong with this one. Now, if I had $5, I would be looking to pick up a copy of Fantastic Four #277. And in this comic, Mephisto suffers a defeat from Franklin Richards. And we find out years later that that ended up in Mephisto's soul being shattered into 6 pieces, and that Scarlet Witch had taken 2 of these pieces and made her children, Tommy and Billy, out of them. And of course that ends up in these children being taken away from her and kind of being reabsorbed by Mephisto, and she loses her children, which turns her into the Dark Scarlet Witch. And of course this is a concept that has been explored in Wandavision, which is why a lot of people thought Mephisto was going to pop up. And personally, I'm kind of bummed that they used this storyline that was inspired by Mephisto, but left Mephisto out of it. As a fan of Mephisto, I'm like, no, why couldn't you actually have that character in there? But regardless, obviously it's a hugely important storyline in the MCU, and it was in the comics, and it begins here in Fantastic Four #277. Now, speaking of storylines in the MCU that were inspired by a Mephisto story, but that don't use Mephisto in the MCU, if I had $10, I'd be looking to buy the variant copy of Amazing Spider-Man #545, which is the culmination of one of the most controversial storylines of all time, called One More Day. And so if you know the background behind this story started with MJ and Peter Parker being married, but the head honchos at Marvel thought that it wasn't good for Peter Parker's long-term character development to be married. They thought you could explore more with this character if you were single, and that young people would more relate to a single Peter Parker. And so they made a decision that they wanted to bring an end to Mary Jane and Peter's marriage. And this caused a real uproar because a lot of fans like me want Peter and MJ to be married. But the head honchos decided, nope, we're going to end their marriage. And so it upset a lot of people like me. But I will say, I'm thankful that at least they decided that they wanted to come up with a storyline that didn't involve MJ and Peter falling out of love. So it wasn't going to end in divorce. Now, of course, that presents a conundrum. How are you going to end a marriage without divorce? And so they came up with this storyline where Peter Parker revealed his secret identity to the public in the Civil War storyline, and this ended up with some bad guys coming after him. and one of the bad guys took a shot at Peter Parker, knowing that's Spider-Man, and it unfortunately hit Aunt May. And she went into critical condition and was basically on her deathbed in the hospital. But Mephisto appears to Peter and offers him what is the epitome of a deal with the devil. And so he tells Peter, hey, I can heal your Aunt May for the right price. And so Peter thinks this means his soul, and so he's getting ready to give up his soul to Mephisto. But Mephisto says, actually, what I want is your marriage. And so Peter's like, I love MJ. How can I offer that? And so MJ pulls Mephisto to the side and says, hey, if you promise never to bother Peter again, then I will convince him to take this deal. And so he does. Yeah, Peter takes the deal, and it ends up, with Mephisto warping reality. Aunt May is healed. Their marriage comes to an end, and everyone forgets that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. And so it has this kind of sense of a reboot to it. Again, very controversial. And so it's such an important storyline in the comics, and basically was how the No Way Home movie concluded, with people's memories of Spider-Man being Peter Parker erased once again, and his relationship with MJ in the movies coming to an end. But again, a Mephisto storyline without Mephisto, so a little frustrating as a Mephisto fan, but I'm at least thankful that the storyline was used in the movies. And I picked the variant edition of this just because it contains a cool Mephisto cover, and also because I needed a book that was a little more than $5. The regular edition you can find for $5, but to do these different values, I had to find a $10 book. All right, well, if I had $50 to spend, I'd be looking to pick up a nice copy of Silver Surfer number 16, which contains this iconic John Buscema Silver Surfer versus Mephisto battle cover. And there's nothing really significant that happens inside, but it's just an awesome Mephisto cover, and probably my personal favorite one, except perhaps what is the Grail, which we will now get to, which of course is Silver Surfer number 3, which has another classic, beautiful John Buscema cover, but most importantly is the first appearance of Mephisto. Now, I was pretty surprised when I found out that Mephisto's first appearance was in a Silver Surfer book. Growing up as a kid, I never considered him to be a Silver Surfer villain. I guess I was reading kind of when the Dark Scarlet Witch saga was going on, and so I always considered him to be more of an Avengers villain. But I'm curious, when you think of Mephisto, write in the comments, kind of who do you think of him being the main antagonist to? Because I think there's a lot of heroes or teams that you could point to. So what do you think? All right, well, if you've been watching this series, you know that I always end it by showing off one of these keys that I recently picked up. And so which one was it? Well, it is, very excitingly, the Grail, Silver Surfer number 3, the first appearance of Mephisto. And what I love about this book is it's got some wear around the edges, a little chip missing here and a little spine split here. And so the grade, kind of stays low, but it looks beautiful. It's very well presenting. And so got it for a good price. It looks beautiful. Super happy to add this to my collection. And I got this from a guy who was selling off his whole collection. So I'll show off the other books that I got from him. And this next book is actually another Mephisto key, but it's actually more valuable than the Mephisto Grail. So how could that be? Well, it's because even though it is a Mephisto key, that's not the reason this book has most of its value. And this is Mephisto's second appearance, which is in Silver Surfer number 4. And the reason this has so much value, again, is not so much because of Mephisto, but because it has this beautiful, classic John Buscema Thor versus Silver Surfer battle cover. And both of these books are ones that I've been hunting for quite a while, and so super happy to add them to my collection. And this seller was definitely a cosmic fan because I also got Marvel Superheroes number 18, which is the first appearance of the original Guardians of the Galaxy, and who I hope have more of a role in the MCU going forward. Of course, Yondu's had a pretty nice role, still obviously a secondary role, and we've seen Charlie 27 and Martin X. I don't think we've seen Vance Astro yet. You can tell me in the comments if I'm wrong about that. but they've had very minor roles. But I'd love to see them have more of a role, because this is the Guardians of the Galaxy that I grew up on. In the early 90s, there was a Guardians of the Galaxy series that I just loved, because it especially had all these future versions of heroes. Like Simon Williams' Wonder Man was still alive, but he's like an old guy now. It had its own version of Mephisto. All cool, new versions of future characters, and so I like that. So I hope we see them more. Now, this seller collected not only cosmic comics, but he's also a big fan of Frank Miller, and so I was able to pick up some cool Daredevil books from his classic Frank Miller run. A couple of them are keys. There's, first of all, this one, Daredevil number 170, which is the first time the Kingpin appears in the Daredevil series, which is pretty amazing to me because I consider them each other's primary foe now. But it wasn't until this issue that they really came into conflict. And it's also the issue where you find out that the Kingpin's real name is Wilson Fisk. So got issue number 174, and this contains the first appearance of the Hand, which of course are other Daredevil classic foes. And the rest of these aren't keys, other than the fact that they're just awesome Frank Miller covers. And this is I think my favorite of the rest of them, especially as a Punisher fan. Daredevil number 183. We have the Punisher just straight blasting through Daredevil on the cover. I gotta read this. Yeah, how does this happen in the book, or is it just like the old version of clickbait? Like, holy cow, Punisher just blew away Daredevil. So I'm looking forward to looking at that one. Other just cool looking covers. All these are awesome. Daredevil 185, Daredevil 187, this awesome Black Widow, Daredevil 188, and then finally Daredevil 191. And so super happy to add those issues to my collection as well. So hope you enjoyed this video. Of course, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, I'd ask if you consider doing so. We are also close to 400 subscribers, and when we get there, I'm going to be giving away 4 issues of Spider-Woman number 1. All you need to do to enter that drawing is to subscribe, and then you get bonus entries if you leave a comment, so please do that. And in fact, I'll give a bonus comment on this video, so you can get 2 extra entries if you tell me what is your favorite Mephisto storyline, or just your favorite thing about Mephisto. Of course, like the video, all those things that help out with our algorithm, and I appreciate you watching and look forward to the next one.